Hey, babe. Today I'm going to show you how to organize your project in arrangement view after you've imported your stems or tracks. First things first, you have to have imported your stems correctly. If you don't know how to do that, please, before you move any further, watch my video linked below on importing stems and tracks. If any of your stems look shorter like this, that indicates that something went awry in the import process and you need to go back to step 1. Another test is you can turn on your metronome and hit play, and your metronome should be in tempo with the stems that you imported. If your metronome sounds off, that also indicates that you need to go back to importing, and you need to make sure that the project tempo that you've set matches the stems that you're going to be importing. So assuming you've imported your tracks correctly, the next thing you're going to want to do is rename all of your tracks. To rename a track, I'm going to click on the track title bar and hit Command R, and now I'm going to call this Kick. Now I feel relatively confident that track 2 is in fact some sort of percussion. The title of the track currently says fills, and looking at these waveforms, they look like they might be percussive, but one can't be too sure. So I'm going to solo my track by hitting the S button, and I'm going to listen to it, going up into the scrub area till I get a speaker. Now I'm going to click with my mouse to play back. That's definitely drums, and it is in fact fills. I could call this toms, or I could call this fills. I'm going to call it tom fills. Clicking on the track title bar, Command R to rename tom fills. Enter or return. Go through this renaming process with each of the tracks that are present in your session before moving on to the next step with me. Hit pause now and then come on back. After you've renamed all of your tracks, the next thing we want to do is we want to organize our session from top to bottom by moving these tracks around. Now, if you make any type of pop music, and I use that genre definition pretty broadly to include hip hop, R&B, trip hop, bubblegum, whatever, fill in the blank, rock and roll, you're going to want to generally put your drums toward the top of your session. There are different schools of thought on this. If there's another way for you that works organizationally, then by all means do it. For me, my drums always go at the top of my session. So I've got to go through and find any drum tracks, and then I'm going to pull them up. Here's a snare, for example. So clicking on the track title bar, now I'm going to drag this up toward the top of my session, and I'm just going to drop it underneath my kick. Here's a hat, so I'm going to click and drag up. And actually, it looks like I didn't rename this one, so quickly I'm going to redo that. Hat, enter. And that might be all of my drum tracks. Okay. Next thing I want to do is I want to create a group of these drum tracks. So clicking on the track title bar of the first track that I want to be present in my group to select it, then finding the last track that I want to be present in that group, I'm going to hold down Shift. So now I've got all of those tracks selected. And then I'm going to hit Command G or Control G if you're on a PC. So now you can see it says group up here. I'm going to want to rename this group drums. Command R to rename drums group, enter. I actually do generally like my drums to be this purplish tanzanite kind of color that I currently have them. So I'm going to keep them that color. But I might want to do some differentiation within my group. So right-clicking on my snare track, I'm going to scroll down to a different shade of purple. And then I'm going to right-click once again, and I'm going to scroll down to Assign Track Color to Clips. And if I want to differentiate further, I might recolor my hat. Once again, assign color to tracks. And maybe I'll recolor my tom fills as well. Okay, so they're all shades of purple living inside of my group. Now that I've got this group, I can click up here and I can collapse that group down if I want to, or I can expand it. Super convenient. This is convenient not only for organization, but also for processing. Okay, now I'm gonna find my bass and I'm gonna put that underneath my drums group. Here's my bass, dragging it up. Dropping it underneath my drums group. I like for my bass to be kind of like a bright chartreusey color. So I'm color coding my bass. Beneath my bass, I usually put my synths and my pianos. So I'm going to go through and gather them. Once I've created all of my groups and I've color coded everything, I'm going to go through my track and I'm going to use track locators to indicate the different places within my song, both in terms of song form or when there's any really significant changes that happen outside of the structural song form. I'm going to use my metronome to figure out where exactly I should place these track locators. And oftentimes the vocal will be a good indicator of what's happening in terms of the song structure. At the very beginning of my track, I know I have an intro, so I'm going to label this intro by right-clicking in the scrub area, scrolling down to add locator, and I'm going to type in and hit return or enter. Once you have a track locator, you can click on that little flag and you can drag it around. I'm going to drag this to the 111, so it's at the very beginning of my session. Now I suspect that the beginning of my verse might be somewhere right around here. I'm going to play back from a little bit before that, and I'm listening for the 1. So the 1 was actually here. I'm going to right click and add locator, and I'm going to call this verse. You might want to put verse 1, verse 2, etc. I'm just going to put verse. And then I'm going to double click on the flag to make sure that I actually pinned that 1 in the right place. It's going to play back from where I have the track locator. And it's correct, so I'm going to leave it. Go through your song and do this for all of your verses, all of your choruses, your bridge, your outro, and so on and so forth. Okay, after you've labeled all of the different parts of your song form using track locators, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to cut silences and apply fades. I'm going to unfold all of my groups so I can see all the tracks inside of them. And starting with my very first group, I'm going to start with the kick, which is the first track in my group. And for this stem, you can see that the kick ends here. So I'm going to hover at the right-hand side of my clip until I get a bracket, and I'm just going to drag backward toward where the audio actually ends. You might want to zoom in for this. You can use the plus sign on your computer keyboard. You can also go up to the top of the timeline and hover till you get a magnifying glass, and you can drag in. I'm kind of dragging in and I'm scrolling simultaneously so I can see the end of that track. So I might want to get a little bit closer than this, hovering once again at the right-hand side of my clip until I get a bracket and dragging back toward the audio. Now, if I hover over the right-hand side of that clip, do you see those little squares that just popped up on the top and bottom? Those are actually called handles. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer to show you this. What I can do is I can grab those handles and I can apply a fade by clicking on one of the handles and dragging toward the audio. When you're applying fades, you want to make sure not to intercept the audio like this, right? Zooming back out, looking at the next track down, I might just click and drag down so that I can see this a little bit more clearly, but I'm going to do the same thing. Dragging backward, zooming in, grabbing those handles, and just putting a fade. I'm going to do this for all of my tracks. Now, I want to also get rid of, let me find an example for you. Okay, like for example, you see how on this piano track, I've got these silences in the middle of my track too, not just like at the beginning and the end. For these significant silences, I do in fact want to cut out these middle regions also. So to do this, I might highlight by clicking with my mouse and dragging to the right. And then I'm going to hit delete on my computer keyboard. Boom, and now I've deleted that section. And once again, I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to apply a fade. And I'm going to want to get rid of this intro area that has pure silence present. And applying a little fade there. So I'm going to go through all of the different tracks in my session, and I'm going to do this with all of them. Now, like, take a look at my kick track. I don't need to go in and like meticulously delete each of these spaces, right? These are too small. But for any tracks that have more substantial areas of silence, like for example, on this track here, the tom fills, I do actually want to go in and delete some of that empty space. So go through and do this for every track, and that's basically the end of your organization. Thanks for joining me. Please subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for future videos. Ciao, babe.